Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Path of Exile 2. Today, as you can see, I'm talking Ranger instead of Mercenary. Now I've devoted some time to trying out this ridiculously fast class. I was drawn to the impressive output that I'd seen online for the class and how it's performing, especially the movement speed it can reach after feeling pretty slow on my Mercenary for a long time. The leveling has been incredible, so I'm excited to talk to you about what I applied to blast the endgame and kind of start my mapping journey. As you can see, we started out pretty strong in the early acts, solid early movement speed, impressive boss killing, essentially instant kills on packs of mobs. But it actually only ramped up into cruel. The bosses started to simply evaporate. Is genuinely crazy. It's very simple, we just use 3 buttons total, and then you're just flying from target to target. Deadeye has this ridiculous ascend passive as well, called Tailwind. It's this one buff that builds up to 10 stacks, providing skill speed, movement speed, and evasion, as well as reduced damage taken as it gets higher and higher. So the goal for the build is simple, right? Have high enough burst that every single enemy dies in one attack. You got massive movement speed, so that you're actually able to blast from zone to zone at triple the speed I did on my Mercenary, and then kill the bosses seconds after they begin to exist. Achieving that, we smoothly started mapping to set up the endgame build, but as you can see, it's been pretty relaxed into my first green tier maps. How it's been done is largely thanks to Gas Arrow, combined with 2 uniques that kind of unlock the ridiculous power of the build. It was a bit of an obvious choice considering how popular using a bow to level, using any class by the way, has been in the early access. Having a martial weapon just kind of means your main damaging skills will scale ultra well and simply from your weapon's physical damage, so having a good weapon that you regularly upgrade is a simple and effective thing. Gas Grenade and Gas Arrow both convert 100% of your physical damage straight into fire damage. They work very similar. But having ran Gas Grenade as my main build through all of the campaign and a good chunk of the endgame, Gas Arrow feels so much smoother. It fires the poison cloud out instantly, where the grenade version fires it, then you have that delay, then it explodes. You might even miss the enemies because of that. So it takes a specific, careful, measured playstyle. Meanwhile, with Gas Arrow, you just spam it and it pops. Like, you know, a straight up fire shotgun by comparison. Also, with the fact that it is a bow, we can directly run Stormcaller Arrow without having to swap or anything, generating shock reliably, meaning we scale our output against every boss massively at the start of the fight. So most of it's coming from Gas Arrow and how we're enhancing that. We're enabling the build with 2 uniques that are not expensive, alongside some basic concepts. The 2 uniques I'm talking about is this one to begin with, Death's Harp Dual String Bow. This is really impactful because it means we don't actually have to use the scatter shot support, allowing us to maintain high damage while actually getting additional projectiles arrows out. So say where you're normally just firing 1 single gas arrow, this causes us to fire 5. Literally just that unique is giving us those 5 projectiles. The thing is, you can achieve a similar effect by running Scattershot the support. The problem is that it means you're doing 20% less damage, and also there's less attack speed as well, so you're actually spamming them out slower. It's a pretty big hit to the output of the skill. Then obviously, if you're going to be using a Gas Arrow or Gas Grenade build, you have to be using the Lace Hood, the Radiant Grief. This causes enemies to be ignited with a low base fire damage ignite, but ultimately, because they're ignited, it means the gas explosion of the arrow actually pops instantly. So you're looking to enhance your physical damage, your element, and your fire boost as much as you really can. But if you combine this with a lot of flat damage, so adds flat physical damage, fire damage, and even other ones like lightning and cold are still going to work, but ideally physical and fire is what you're aiming for. And as the enemies have smaller health pools during the whole of the campaign, even cruel, even early mapping, they're all dying instantly because I'm stacking a lot of flat damage. Having a lot of it on my quiver, you can see we have 4 of them total, including the inherent, on the quiver alone. But you've got it on your rings, your gloves, keeping that burst really high. So with all that set up, you're just sort of sprinting past everything, shooting one-shot killing gas arrows. With some nice attack speed woven in, you're able to spam these out so there's no stragglers, and you can simply spam that out and delete rares, and especially bosses throughout your run. Now I'm into early mapping, it's been working great for the same reasons, but I do want to buff it up with some proper defenses next, getting some gear to get my resistance caps, stack some evasion, probably leaning to energy shield as a buffer, but I'm going to worry about that in the next one. Let's cover this build and how it's worked and explain it all. First up, let's talk about the basics of how you begin this build if you're just like level 1. That's going to be Lightning Arrow quickly into Lightning Rod. As you can see, the combination of these 2 is simple and very effective. You put the rod down, you shoot the targets with the lightning arrows, the lightning arrow bounces off the rod, and you can drop a bunch of rods on the target, such as a boss, say 5 in a row, and then start sending arrows into them to just do ridiculous hyper damage early. The moment you hit level 22 though, that's when we actually unlock gas arrow, which is where this all begins. The moment you start running gas arrow, you can also, actually buy and run the Radiant Grief Lace Hood, because this requires level 16, so there's no excuse. You can immediately have this the moment gas arrow becomes an option. Combined with that, I run Stormcaller Arrow just for the really high chance that it deals that shock, since shock is going to increase the damage we deal to a target, all damage, starting at 20% increased damage overall. With that, I also run Barrage, because this allows me to repeat the attack super quick. So as I fire off a gas arrow, that's just it. But if I set it up with the Barrage beforehand, then press it, it fires off this triple selection of them, and that is a lot of gas arrow explosions going off on a target. I try to hold this for the stun when they're exposed and vulnerable, and then just smash them with it. My setup's a little bit jank right now because I just changed over some stuff just to show you the gear I was running. So yes, obviously I've got Herald of Ash and it is running when I'm wearing what I'm wearing now. But basically, Herald of Ash, it causes overkill damage to also explode in an ignition around the targets. The reason we're doing that, despite having ignition with Lace Hood, is that this is a low level ignite. This is just going to be a stronger one. And there are perks you can get by running a Herald. So it's like, why not? Alongside that, I have Wind Dancer for the evasion rating that provides me per stage that it has. But I wanted to show you here that on Wind Dancer, you can run supports that don't actually cost any spirit and will be relevant, because as you're attacked and it breaks the Wind Dancer buff, it causes Gale Force, doing damage around you in a little knockback. This could be supported with some relevant, simple supports, such as Blind to actually cause that Gale Force to blind the enemies, meaning they have less accuracy rating, and also they're a little bit more exposed. And then there are other good options, like Maim and Pin. This can hold enemies in place, where Maim will slow them. Personally, I prefer Maim. Neither of these actually cost spirit though, so it's really easy to run without having high-end spirit. You'll also note that I was running Herald of Thunder in the very early stages for Lightning Arrow, Lightning Rod, but we're well beyond that now. So let's start with Gas Arrow itself. I'm running Martial Tempo to increase the attack speed so we can spam it out faster. We've got Concentrated Effect, so we've got 40% more area damage, but it's in a smaller area. No problem on rares or bosses, but it can be annoying for mobbing. So if it is an annoyance for you, I'd take off Concentrated Effect and slam in something like Elemental Focus just to increase the raw damage, or you could go with Fire Infusion as an alternative to that. But Concentrated Effect is 40% compared to say 25%, so it's really potent indeed. With that, we also run Primal Armament for the increased element damage, and lastly Immolate for the 30% increased damage, because it's doing extra fire damage against ignited enemies, and the whole build is about igniting enemies. Around that, we have Barrage. So Barrage, I've just got very basic supports. We've got Ingenuity for the cooldown recovery rate, and Premeditation to empower it, so it's actually providing me with more damage when I press it. Finally, for Stormcaller Arrow, we don't really care to do much with this. Lightning Infusion means it's going to hit harder, so more likely to actually shock. But because of all the flat lightning I also have in my build, there's plenty of times where I don't even need to use this. It's just to guarantee it on bosses, and I just fire it once and it always works, so I don't really think about it too much. With that, we have Herald of Ash. I'm supporting that with Cannibalism for some sustain and Clarity for mana, and yet Wind Dancer as we just showed with Blind and Maim. Let's start with the Ascend then. I've only got my first 2 points since we were only just barely level 67, just starting the endgame. And obviously I'm going Tailwind to get the 10 stacks. Tailwind's giving me skill speed, evasion rating, and movement speed. And then as you upgrade into Wind Ward, this means you're getting 3% less damage taken per those Tailwind stacks, which is pretty impressive damage reduction. After this, I would probably consider going into projectile proximity and going for point blank, and maybe something like endless munitions after that. But it's the whole build, the end game is going to change a lot, so I'm going to look into that when I get to that. For the skill tree setup, I think it's very simple and straightforward. We come straight down here and get Honed Instincts, giving us projectile speed and attack speed. This is relevant as we get later down the line. We want everything that can increase our output. So we're obviously going to pick up Vile Wounds for the massive damage increase against enemies that are ignited, so all of them. Also, Clean Shot for projectile damage. You'll note we do come over here since there's more projectile damage, and we want the stun buildup of heavy ammunition. I experienced this for my mercenary in the different setups I was running for when I'd be doing pinnacle bossing. This means we're always able to stun a boss super quick, so coming over here is well worth it. But as there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 travel nodes here, I would maybe come there later on. Coming down this way first, we're going to dip into Master Fletching. This is important because we get big bonuses to our equipped quiver from the nodes here. These nodes give us a combined number of 80 20% more. And since we have so much flat damage here, that is a big increase. Working our way further down, we do dip into escape velocity for the movement speed and evasion rating. And then I would rather come this way before going up, because we get to dip into some element damage, increasing damage to those that we're close to, raw, just straight up attack damage, and as well as some main benefits, all for very few points. Really efficient. Then that brings us down to the actual bow tree, as it were, bringing us straight through the middle to increase attack speed with bows and the damage of them. And then we also get feathered fletching, which provides bonuses to our damage for bows if we have better projectile speed. Projectile speed's interesting because, as I said a second ago, we do actually increase that here as well, but there seems to be other perks to it. For example, this node here that gives us movement speed that I was interested in, it provides skill speed, affects the speed at which all skills are used, increases and reductions to skill speed stack additively with increases and reductions to attack speed, cast speed, and warcraft speed and similar stats. And so it seems because of feathered fletching, skill speed is also providing me with a straight damage increase. As when I put points into this, it literally showed that damage increase in the DPS number. At this point then, it's time to start to fill out the tree. So I do come out down here and pick up a jewel slot, and then we get exploit for some more element damage potential. I would then come over here, picking up heavy ammunition, careful aim, and head around to ricochet through remorseless for even more projectile based damage. And here's where I start to spend my points in a little bit more spread out way, like coming up here for harness the elements, caring just about the ones to do with shock, since we do have some lightning with the Stormcaller arrow and the flat damage we have on our gear. Sadly, the ones to do with fire are a chance to ignite, and we're guaranteed igniting things with our unique helm anyway, so it's not relevant. We pass through escape velocities nodes just for more evasion rating, and then travel through a jewel socket, coming around to Falcon Technique. This gives us more attack speed per 15 dexterity, and I am stacking quite a lot of it. And I'm going to come to the right here to get big dexterity and more evasion as well, at which point I may save some points here and just come through here, but I'm not quite there yet. So in the meantime, I do spend some points traveling up here to pick up Coming Calamity, giving us massive increase to fire damage while we've got the Herald of Ash buff. And during mob clear, that should be relatively consistent. So another damage increase. And that's what it's mostly about. Like I said, I do really need to actually address my defenses now, but going hyper offense worked incredibly for blasting. In terms of jewels, it's just whatever you've got that's relevant in this initial stage. So fire damage, bow damage, attack speed, element damage. I'm just very limited on what jewel options I have right now because, I've just hit the end game on this character. Right, let's now talk gear, because obviously I've started to change my setup, but I wanted to show you what I was doing. So let's blast through this. Firstly, again, we have the Death's Harp dual string bow as the basis of the build. You get this at level 28, you get gas arrow at level 22, so there's kind of an awkward period before then. There's a couple things you could do during that time. One unique to keep it simple could be Widow's Hail Crude Bow on a high roll on the actual bonus you get from the equipped quiver. And this can be a very relevant choice right now. As you can see, my DPS right now is 7k. As we put this on with the massive bonuses from the quiver, it jumps up to 12k. The problem with that is now I'm firing one arrow at a time. I'd have to put scatter shot on, then I'm going to lose a massive amount of that DPS, and then I've got 2 less projectiles overall. But either way, it is a great option early because you can use it from level 1, which is really nice. But obviously it depends entirely on your quiver, and that is an important piece of gear. Otherwise, regularly running a rare bow, upgrading it when you can, getting high physical damage, finding some fire damage on it, lots of flat, obviously great to do. Of course, we're running the Radiant Grief Lace Hood, that's required, you're going to need that. And then the uniques for early movement speed, I was running Foxshade Quilted Vest for the entire campaign through to Cruel, and I've only just started to take it off for mapping now that I need to work on my defenses. It gives you 10% increased movement speed when you're on full life and some evasion rating, so it is a nice piece of gear all the same. For boots, I was running Wanderlust Wrap Sandals, also providing a flat 20% increase to movement speed, and you can run this from level 11, and it only cost me 1 exalt, so another great pickup. When you're ready to transfer though, you want to do that. The moment you find some boots that give you 20% movement speed or higher and actually provide other defenses, that's what I've actually wanted to do that. So I'm changing my chest piece as well to give myself some proper defenses too. For gloves, I want you to make sure you have at least 2 flat damage increases. Ideally that's physical and fire, but whatever you can get. Same thing on your rings. If you can get 1 or 2 flat damage increases, that's going to be great too. But obviously you look for whatever resistances you can get. Evasion, energy shield, and if you're lucky, maybe increase the rarity of items found. And that's the same for the belt. For the amulet, obviously as you're leveling, you're going to find whatever you can find. I've got this one that I've slapped on from my mercenary that he was wearing. I'm not expecting you to have an allocation, and I'm not certain that I'm going to keep unbound forces. But it does increase the magnitude of my shock, increasing the damage I'm dealing to bosses when I'm applying that shock, so still pretty good. But yeah, get your resistances, get some defenses, an extra level to projectile skills, certainly not a bad thing. If I could recommend any quiver though, I'd recommend Fire Quiver since that comes with the flat fire damage, and the number seems to be higher than the physical one. And then generally you try to aim for 3 affixes that provide flat damage. That's the goal. But if you only can get 2, that's fine. And I'm going to work on a proper ideal one next, I'm sure. I also want to highlight for one of my rings during the whole of the campaign, I just dropped it and sold it. That's why I've not got it now. It was the Death Rush ring. This provides you onslaught, which mostly, movement speed, a little bit of other perks every time you kill an enemy, just helping me zoom a little bit more. Amazing for leveling, strongly recommend it. But yeah, the gameplay is super simple. We're just running around, basically gas arrowing everything that comes near us. For packs of enemies, that's just spreading it out as best you can. Obviously, I'm running condensed, so it's not as large an AoE, so I need to be a bit more specific about where I shoot, but it's not that big of a deal. The beauty of the weapon we're running is that it provides a huge amount of life and mana per kill, providing a ton of sustain. So you're able to just spam these out, just killing everything without worrying about drinking mana potions all that much. Whenever you find an enemy that's a bit stronger, maybe you'll use Barrage first so you can triple gas arrow it, destroy it. And against bosses, you also just make sure to start the fight with, at least one Stormcaller arrow at some point to guarantee you get that shock to magnify the damage you're dealing with your gas arrows. Generally, I open the fight by spamming a bunch of arrows while it's doing the RP. It activates and explodes in fire, probably gets stunned. I'll shoot a Stormcaller arrow, unless I've already from flat damage and lightning got the shock. I'll pop Barrage, triple gas arrow, and it'll either just die right there, or I'll just finish it off. And generally the whole thing ends in a couple seconds. It's absolutely incredible. But as we go into the end game and we get into the conclusion of this build, obviously this is incredible for leveling. It's been super fun for the movement and the output and the simple nature of it. I can't believe how much better this feels compared to Gas Grenade that I've been running for so long on my mercenary. Am I expecting this to scale well into the true endgame though? Probably not based on the nerfs. My goal now is to take a look at the top end Deadeye players, see what builds they're running and why, and then find something that works really well, that's really strong, probably based on those concepts. But ideally without ridiculous gear that requires a lot of divines. I want to provide a realistic build for you guys to use in the end game, not one that's just like, yeah, so to run this you need 200 divines. So hopefully I'll be back soon to cover that. But for now, I hope this was useful or interesting, those of you trying Ranger and maybe thinking about an alt. So I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.